Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the internet, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an honor and privilege to have you guys joining me here today, as it is every day, as we, a bunch of friends standing around a virtual water cooler, talking about our favorite things, movies and movie news, all sorts of good stuff. And we got a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about today, and we're going to get things started with this. As many of you guys know, there's a supposed Flash movie on the way. DC and Warner Brothers has been trying to get a Flash movie going together, and it's been delayed again. According to reports coming out all over the place, production on the film has once again been pushed and delayed. Currently, the target date was in the first 3 months sometime of 2019. They are now saying it could start shooting in the last part of 2019, which means pretty much at this point that you're not going to see a Flash movie until 2021. Now, just to kind of look back at some of the drama that has surrounded this Flash movie. And by the way, I should point out here, I really like Ezra Miller's Flash. I really do. I liked their incarnation of the Flash that they used in Justice League. I thought Ezra Miller was great in the role. I really like the way they're going with the character, and I'm looking forward to seeing this movie. But again, more drama has been going on. So let's just take a look at a brief history of the not-so-fast Flash. Okay, so originally, the movie got announced in 2014. That's when they first announced that a Flash movie was coming. It was originally announced that it would have a March 2018 release date. That obviously came and went. Originally, it had the really good director Seth Grahame-Smith on board to direct the film. He was on board for about a year, and then he left the film over creative differences. Then they went and got dope director Rick Famuyiwa, who came on, and he was going to direct, and everybody's all excited. And then he left over creative differences. Then eventually they brought on the two guys who directed National Lampoon's the Family Vacation one they just did with Ed Helms. Then they had production planned to go and start again in 2018. That got delayed. Then they planned to start production in early 2019. That then got delayed. And now we're looking at a last part of 2019, which basically means we're probably looking at a 2021 until they announce their next delay on the film. Now, look, there's a lot of different reasons that can go into this sort of thing happen. And by the way, a lot of movie projects have their road bumps. A lot of movie projects have road bumps, delays, a change in writer. I think they've gone through 4 changes in writers for The Flash. Anyway, they've gone through 3 different sets of directors. But every movie does go through stuff like this. It's not all that common, though, that you get a film like Flash or a project like Flash that hits this many bumps in the road. All I know is this. Like I said, I like Ezra Miller's Flash. I like the direction they've gone in. Now, these guys who are supposedly going to be directing the film now, they just did Game Night. Game Night's not a great movie, but it's a funny comedy. And if they are looking to bring a lot more of the humor to the darker toned, if you will, DCEU, they might do a pretty good job. And like I said, I kind of like what they did with the character in Batman vs. Superman, or I should say in Justice League. I like what they did with them. Don't like everything about Justice League, but that's one of the things that I quite liked about it. So we'll just have to wait a little bit longer. But you know what? Who cares? We got Aquaman coming in just a couple of months, and we're all very excited about that. So we'll see how all that goes. What do you guys think? First of all, I got to ask you guys, do you think this Flash movie is even going to happen at this point? No, seriously. Do you even think it's going to happen at this point? I want to know what you think. Jump down to the comment section and let me know your thoughts. All right. Now let's go on to the main topics today. Now the main topics are, of course, selected from topics and questions that you guys email in to me. How do you email in a topic or a question to possibly be on the John Campea Show? It's simple. You just email to john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Put the word topic in the subject line. And as always, guys, keep those emails to 90 words or less. All right, let's get on with the first email today. And the first email today comes to us from Verhan Mushar Heyman, who writes, "Greetings and salutations, Mr. Campea. I grew up watching old Tom and Jerry cartoons, and I just read that they're doing a live-action animation mixed Tom and Jerry movie. The only problem is Tim Story is directing it. Isn't he the same guy who did those terrible Fantastic Four movies? Why? All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And you know what's funny? I swear it was only a couple of weeks ago. I think somebody in like one of the live question segments of either Open Mic or the John Campea show, I think it was only a couple of weeks ago that somebody actually asked if I thought they would do a Tom and Jerry show. I said, hey man, anything's possible. I doubt it. It seems like a little old. I think that Tom and Jerry got created like in the 40s. So I think it's a little far removed, so I doubt it. I mean, anything's possible. They could do it, but I doubt it. And here we are. They're doing a Tom and Jerry live action / animated hybrid film, which probably means Tom and Jerry will be animated. The rest of them is going to be, everything else is going to be live action. And they are doing Tim's story is coming along. Now, on top of that, not only did they announce like some developments in Tom and Jerry, we've known for a while that they're looking at doing a new Scooby-Doo animated film. And they announced that Chris Columbus has come on as a producer. Now, the last I heard, this is going back a number of months, Dax Shepard is supposed to be directing the Scooby-Doo animated film. Actually, I thought he was even writing it. But anyway, Dax Shepard was supposed to be directing it, which I like Dax Shepard very much, but I have not liked his directorial efforts. I did not like what he did with Hit and Run. He just did Chips recently, which was god-awful. Like, just awful. Terrible. He wasn't a bad star in it, but the movie itself was horrendous, and you got to put that on the director. So, I don't know about that. The more intriguing thing, though, to me, though, is the Tom and Jerry thing. And getting back now, I think, you know what's funny? I bet you more people today know Itchy and Scratchy, which were based on Tom and Jerry. But I bet you today more people recognize the name Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons than they do Tom and Jerry. Anyway, Tim's story, it's not just the Fantastic Four films. Tim's story's directed a lot. Some not so bad. Some pretty bad. Let's look at some of the more notable films from director Tim Story. Of course, he did Fantastic Four and Fantastic Four 2, and those were awful. He did Ride Along, which actually is not that bad. I like Ride Along. But then he did Ride Along 2, which was just terrible. He did Taxi, which was terrible, with Jimmy Fallon and Queen Latifah. Awful. I'm come see come saw on Barbershop, and I actually like the Think Like a Man movies. I think Think Like a Man movies were pretty fun, very, very light, very charming, very innocent enough. Not huge risks, but some pretty good entertainment. So Think Like a Man 1 and 2, I didn't mind those. Boy, Tim Story likes doing those sequels. Fantastic Four 1 and 2, Ride Along 1 and 2, Think Like a Man 1 and 2. Anyway, so kind of a mix. Out of these three, I really don't mind the Think Like a Man movies, and I don't mind Ride Along at all. Actually, I enjoy Ride Along. I think that was pretty good, but then again, he followed it up with Ride Along 2, and there you go. What makes Tim Story the right guy to do a Tom and Jerry movie? I'm not sure. Look, I have no problem with him taking a shot at Tom and Jerry. I just got to admit, though, if you sat down with me and said, list 30 directors, 30, that you could see doing a Tom and Jerry movie, and I took a couple hours and wrote out a list of Tim Story wouldn't have been on the list. So I think that's an intriguing addition. I am curious to see how this goes. I mean, could it be great and classic like Babe? Or could it be the next Garfield movie? I mean, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm glad they're doing it. I didn't think they would. And here we are. Let's see what Tim Story can do with that. I'm a little bit nervous about it, to be honest. All right. Let's move on to email number 2. And the second email today comes to us from Aria, who writes, "Hey John, love your show. Thank you so much, Aria. Have you heard the news that Jack Bannon has been cast as the young Alfred and Ben Aldridge as young Thomas Wayne in the Batman prequel TV series? What are your thoughts, and keep up the great work?" All right, for those of you who are wondering, Batman prequel TV series, isn't that Gotham? No, some of you may have forgotten about this. The network Epix is launching a young Alfred. Yes, you heard me right. Alfred, the butler of Batman. They're launching a young Alfred TV series. I believe it's just going to be called Pennyworth. I think that's the name of the show. Pennyworth? Anyway, it's named after Alfred Pennyworth, right? And so Bannon, look, both of these guys are not guys I'm really familiar with. The only thing I know Bannon from is that he had a supporting role in, I believe it was The Imitation Game. So he had a supporting role in that. I really don't know anything that either he or the dude who's playing Thomas Wayne, I'm not familiar with their work. So that's fine. Whatever. That's not the big thing. I'm going to tell you, I feel probably like the way most of you feel about this particular project. How stupid, right? I mean, isn't that our first reaction to this? How stupid and idiotic is this? Now, and it should be noted, this series is in no way connected to Gotham. It's a totally different universe. It's not connected to Gotham at all, even though the same producer and the guy who's going to be directing the first episode of Pennyworth is the same guy who produced and directed the first episode of Gotham. But they're not connected in any way, shape, or form, so keep that in mind. Pennyworth is not a prequel to Gotham. All right? Are we clear? There we go. But like most of you, my first reaction was pretty damn negative. This sounds stupid. Why would you do this? I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have joked, what's next, an Aunt May movie? Anyway, but I'm going to say this, okay? Just follow me here. I read the description they're putting out for what they're envisioning Pennyworth to be, and I got to say it's not bad. It is a little bit intriguing. I believe this is from the Hollywood Reporter who wrote this. Pennyworth's Alfred is described as a boyishly handsome, cheerful, charming, clever young man from London. Where do we go? He is honest. Is that what he is? Oh, wait a sec. I did this in the wrong order. Sorry, I brought up the second frame. Let's bring up this one first. The series, which is not a Gotham prequel, despite hailing from showrunner Bruno Heller, revolves around Alfred Pennyworth, a former British SAS soldier in his 20s who forms a security company and goes to work with a young billionaire Thomas Wayne, who is not yet Bruce's father in the 1960s London. Now we get on to this paragraph. Pennyworth's Alfred is described as a boyishly handsome, cheerful, and charming, clever young man from London. Honest, open-faced, and witty, he's the kind of person people would never take for an SAS killer. Alfred doesn't know how to reconcile the kind-hearted boy he used to be with the cold, calculated killer he was forced to become. He's a man on the make who doesn't know what to make of himself yet. Look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I read those statements, and I got to say, I warmed up a little bit to the idea. Alfred is a fascinating character. I mean, through many, many different iterations of the comic books, whether it's on television, animated stuff, or in live action, whether it's on television or in the movies, they've often alluded to really interesting stuff in Alfred's background, never really fully explored. And I will say this, I still think this show is a very odd idea. I still think doing this show is a very odd idea, but I will admit that what I'm reading and how they're describing the character and how they're describing the show, I will admit it makes me warm up a little bit to it. I'm not saying I'm on board with Pennyworth yet. Not at all. But I'm saying there's less edge to my dislike of the idea now than there was before. So I don't know, does reading that outline, does reading those statements, a synopsis about the show, does that do anything for you? Does that not do anything at all? Do you still hate the idea as much as you did before? Do you go, yeah, I still dislike it, but maybe I don't hate it now? Like, what does that description do for you? I'm just being honest with you. It's a pretty intriguing description that makes me at least a little bit curious. So I don't know. We'll see what kind of direction they go with this thing. All right, let's move on now to the third email. And the third email today comes to us from... I guess we didn't get a name put in there. Somebody from the Philippines, because they're a big fan from the Philippines. Hope you are doing well, and congratulations on the new endeavor. Thank you so much. I just saw the teaser trailer for the Amazon Prime series, The Boys. Wow. I have been a huge fan of the comics and cannot wait for this. So happy they got Simon Pegg to play Wee Huey's dad. Your thoughts, thanks, and keep up the filthy. All right. Thanks a lot for the email. And here's the thing. We've known for a while that The Boys was coming. And I believe it was like in early this year or late 2017, they announced that Amazon was going to be doing this show, The Boys. Here's the thing. I had never read the comics of The Boys, but I read about the comics and they sounded bonkers. So I hopped on Comixology, grabbed a couple issues. It's bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. Okay, so for those of you who don't know anything about The Boys, okay, The Boys imagines the world where there's a lot of superheroes around the world. The problem is the superheroes are all dicks. Like they're really douchebags and jerks, right? Like on the surface, they have this veneer of, oh, we're here to save the world, blah, blah, blah. But really, they're depraved, they're corrupt, they're violent, they're like just really awful, awful people, right? Embodied by this main superhero group, and there's several superhero groups, including I think they're called the B-Men or something, which is a takeoff of the X-Men. And anyway, then there's this group called the Seven, right? Called the Seven. They're like the Justice League. They've got an Aquaman type of character. They got a Martian Manhunter type of character. They got a Wonder Woman type of character. And they have a Superman kind of character as well. The Superman character, I love his name because he dresses in the stars and stripes and everything. He's called the Homelander. And he's kind of their Superman type of character. He's the head of the Seven, they're called. And one of the unfortunate things in this one issue, like Homelander kills... whether it's on purpose or accidentally, he just has a sex addiction and he has sex with a lot of prostitutes. The problem is because he's so superpowered, he often ends up killing the prostitutes by having sex with them. He literally screws them to death. And they're real douchebags. Anyway, The Boys is this group put together by this international agency to take down superheroes, right? Led by a guy named Butcher, who's going to be played by Carl Urban. Which I love Carl Urban. You all know I've got a huge soft spot for Carl Urban. He was my guest on one of my Masters of the Web panels at Comic-Con a few years ago. I love this guy. I think he's great. The things you could do with this show are insane, depending on if they're really willing to go really R with it. If they're willing to go like a Preacher kind of avenue with it, they could do some really, really cool stuff. Anyway, the trailer for this actually hit online like almost a week and a half ago, maybe even 2 weeks ago, and it totally flew under my radar. And your email made me go, wait a minute, a Boys trailer dropped? I don't know, it completely flew under my radar. I went and checked it out, and you got Elizabeth Shue in there, who I guess plays some kind of PR agency for superheroes, including she represents the Seven. It looks great. Here's the funny thing. If you watch the trailer for The Boys, knowing nothing about The Boys' backstory, it may not seem all that interesting to you. But once you know a little bit about The Boys' backstory and then watch the trailer, you just start to salivate. And you're going, oh my gosh, this is going to be so good. This is going to be so good. I am so excited for this. If you guys, now that I've given you a description for The Boys is kind of about, go and watch this trailer. Understanding what The Boys is really all about. I'm excited for this. I can't wait to see it. So for me, I'm just kind of counting down the days till I get to have a chance to watch it. All right, let's move on to the fourth and final email today. And the fourth and final email today comes to us from Martin V, who writes, Hey, John. I heard you mention once in an open mic that Marvel should consider changing Magneto from a white to a black character. I did say that once. I'm not opposed to the idea, but I was just wondering why you thought they should make the change with this particular character. Love the show. All right, thanks a lot for the question, Martin. So here's the thing. I'm not the only one who's saying this is an idea and a theory that's been batted around online and on this show and on other shows quite a bit. Let me give you some context for this first. Understand this. For those of you who have watched me for any period of time, going all the way back to the movie blog days, you guys know who my all-time favorite comic book character is. It ain't Batman, it ain't Superman, it ain't Captain America, it ain't Spider-Man. My all-time, bar none, favorite comic book character, not comic book villain, comic book character is Magneto. Has been for decades. Magneto, to me, represents all the best things about comic book stories. He is a multi-layered character with so much going on. He is both misunderstanding and misunderstood. He's a guy whose good intentions often blur the lines with his own sense of morality. He is a guy who struggles, and ultimately, he represents the best thing about great villains in comic books. He's a villain who truly sees himself as the hero. He really, truly, dedicatedly believes with great conviction that what he does is the right thing to do. Forget the comic book stretch where he's part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. What? He does not see himself as evil when you really know the character. This was all epitomized then by Bryan Singer back in 2000, the greatest opening to a comic book movie ever, with the scene of a young Erick, that's Magneto, in the concentration camp, in this horrific scene, and they desaturated the color, it was very gray, it was very rainy, and these Nazi soldiers separating him from his parents and from his family. And that kind of triggering his power and his anger. And we see the metal fences start to crumple, and he's like, you get a taste of the supreme power that is Magneto. Magneto, to me, is the greatest comic book character of all time. I love this character. So I made a mention the other day, and I'm not the first one to suggest it. I've heard it other places too. I mentioned the other day that I thought once Marvel does get their hands on the X-Men characters, that I believe that they should probably look at making Magneto a black character, make him an African-American character. Now, here's the thing. Before anybody goes, before any of you go freaking out, just listen to me for a second. And then if you want to go afterwards, feel free. But just hear me out first, okay? Here's my thing. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about, changing races of different comic book characters for this reason or that reason, all that kind of stuff. You guys know my basic thing. As long as a character's race is not uniquely important to the narrative of who the character is, for instance, Black Panther being black, when you understand who the character is, you kind of need him to be black. As long as the race of a character is not fundamentally and intrinsically connected to the narrative of who that character is, I'm okay with changing characters' races. I don't mind. Now, me personally, all other things being equal, I just kind of prefer to keep characters whatever race they were created as. That's just me. I'm open to changing it, but for the most part, all other things being equal, keep it the same. If you come up with a good reason to change it, then go ahead and change it. I don't really care. I really don't. With Magneto, the reason somebody like myself would say something along the lines of, oh, hey, maybe we should change this character to a black character, is probably not for the reasons that you're thinking. See, I've always believed, if you've also watched me for any period of time, that movies are not there to serve characters. Characters are there to serve the story. And characters do not serve the actors. Actors are there to serve the characters. Characters are then there to serve the story. Narrative is the most important thing, right? You guys know I've always believed that. Narrative is the most important thing. So you see, when I say I think they should change Magneto from a white to a black character, is not for any reason of, oh, let's mix it up. Nope, that has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. My reasons for believing Marvel should look at changing the character of Magneto from a white to a black character is all about the narrative and all about the story. Here's what I mean. The brilliance of the Ian McKellen era of Magneto is so beautifully connected to his backstory and his origin story as a survivor, like in the movie, you remember we're talking about the movie universe here, as a survivor of the Nazis and the concentration camps and the horrors that he went through. That experience, now listen to me here. It is that pivotal experience that a young Erick went through that molded, shaped, and formed the praxis paradigm for how that young Erick saw the world. It was that experience that he had as a young Erick that formed and molded and created the ultimate paradigm structure from which he saw the world through. It made him look at humanity as corrupt, beyond redemption, inherently violent, inherently evil, inherently destructive. Right or wrong, the experience of a young Erick is what formed the basis for the man he would become, and turned him into a very misunderstood, to some a hero, to some a villain, but turned him into a very misunderstood character. But at the end of the day, his whole motivation was, I need to stand up and save my fellow mutants. We need to create a world where my fellow mutants can feel safe and feel not threatened and not be threatened with extinction and all that kind of stuff, because I've been through that shit, says Erick. And so you start to get the formation, the juxtaposition of a Magneto and an Erick versus a Charles, Professor X, and their different mentalities, both wanting good things for their people. Both Erick and Charles, Professor X, wants safety, not being threatened with extinction. They want a world in which mutants can live and share the differences, the methodologies, because they grew up with different paradigm frameworks. Erick's paradigm framework was formed in a concentration camp under the Nazis. And that was a pivotal narrative function that formed who and what Erick Lesnar is, right? Here comes the fundamental problem that we're going to be facing. The fundamental problem that we're going to be facing going into a new era of X-Men films, as Marvel takes them over, and probably seeing our first Marvel X-Men thing probably dropping in like 2022, 2023, something like that. The challenge they face is that brilliant Bryan Singer scene in the concentration camp, that was nearly 20 years ago. That was nearly 20 years ago. You can no longer do a Magneto character who as a young boy was in the concentration camps unless you want your Magneto character to be in his mid-80s. You can't do it. If you're going to tell, now if you want to do an X-Men film, if Marvel wants to do an X-Men film set in 1985, fine. If they want to do an X-Men film set in 2002, fine. You can find ways to do that. But if you're doing a modern X-Men film, follow me here, you can't have an Erick Lesnar character who was a young boy in 1940. Unless you're okay with doing a Magneto character who's in his mid-80s approaching 90. You can't do it. So what do you do? What do you do now with a Magneto character who is my all-time favorite comic book character, who I believe is the deepest and richest comic book character in the history of comic books? I know most of you won't agree, but that's my opinion. What do you do with them? Do you just throw away the Magneto character? You shut your mouth. You do not throw away the Magneto character. Do you divorce Magneto from that traumatic exposure to the dark side of humanity? No, that's fundamental to who Erick is. There is no Magneto without that life experience. So then what's the option? I and several others online believe that a really good option here to maintain the narrative integrity of this character is to say, okay, we need to change then the triggering incident. We need to change the societal problem that young Erick faced. It can't be the concentration camps anymore. It's got to be something else. And it can't just be a single incident. It had to be something that surrounded him. It had to be something that he lived in. It had to be a cultural context that defined him. That's what it needs to be if you're going to stay faithful to the narrative integrity of the character. And I believe staying faithful to the narrative integrity of the character is of paramount importance. So, what other type of life experience could a young Erick go through that would reasonably lead him down the same path that the traditional Erick, growing up in the concentration camps, would provide, that would make him lose faith, that develop a fundamental belief that all humanity is corrupt, violent, destructive, and form that paradigm from which he views the world? Well, let's go back to the creation of the characters of Magneto and Charles Xavier. For those of you who know the comics and who truly know the origin of the comics and who follow Stan Lee and all that kind of stuff, you already know this. Some of you may not. Do you know who Magneto was based off of? Do you know who Magneto became a living, allegorical, living representation of? Stan Lee's already confirmed this. Malcolm X. And Charles Xavier was an allegorical, living example of Martin Luther King. These two men who both in one way had the same vision, but very different methodologies, which led them into some conflict with each other, became the basis, Stan Lee says, of the formation of Magneto and Professor Charles Xavier. Understanding, if you know the comics, understanding that that was really the origin of these characters, does it, I submit to you, forget race for a second. Forget race for a second. Does it not then logically follow that if you got this character who you can no longer use his traditional origin because of age, if you've got this character, you can no longer use his traditional origin, and the very creation of this character was based around a cultural set of circumstances back in the 50s and 60s. And he was modeled after one of the highlight individuals of that era. Is it really so crazy? Honestly, just put your bias away for a second. Is it really all that crazy then to go, well, look, we need a new origin story for this guy, but we want to maintain functional narrative integrity? He was based off these characters. Is it really so crazy to say, instead of the concentration camps, let's say this young Erick grew up in the midst of the 1950s, he was a young man in the 1950s, in the whole racial tension of the era that led him to the same place that young Erick in the concentration camps was. That he doesn't believe it, that humanity is any good. He just believes that humanity is inherently corrupt and destructive, and it forms the paradigm from which he views the world. In essence, you are fulfilling the creator's origins of Magneto and Charles in making them essentially a Malcolm X and a Martin Luther King character. To really feel that and to be on the baseball bat end of the culture context, that means young Erick's got to be a young black man. He's got to be a young black kid at the time. As a young white kid, he just would have experienced that era completely differently. It is because of those reasons, not because of diversity, honestly. And there's arguments to be made for diversity, but me thinking that Marvel, once they get their hands on a Magneto, should maybe consider making him a black character, has nothing to do with diversity. It has nothing to do with, social balances or anything like that. I mean, other people may have that opinion, and that's fine. For me, it's all about being faithful to the narrative integrity of the character. That's all it's about to me. And if you really want to stay true to the narrative integrity of the character, I can think of very few better ways than in changing that original origin story from the 1940s, moving it up 10 to 20, 15 years, 20 years to the late 1950s, the 1960s, and make that the cultural explosion that formed what Erick would become Magneto. Now, there are many people who get very, very triggered as soon as you start talking about the possibility of changing a character's race. As a matter of fact, this video had almost 80 dislikes on it, even before the video started, because people get so triggered. They didn't even want to wait to hear what the rationale was. They didn't even want to wait to hear what the reasoning was. They just get, because, there are a lot of very fragile people out there. They hear about changing race, dislike. Okay, fine. That's fine. Now look, If you just sat down and listened to my reasons why I think a move, not because of diversity's sake, but because of narrative integrity's sake, if you're somebody who just sit down and listen to me explain why I believe it would behoove Marvel to consider making Magneto a black character, and you disagree with my reasoning, that's fine. That's great. No problem. Just don't be one of these little trigger-happy, fragile people who just hear anything about it, don't even want to hear what the rationale is, and just go off, which I'm sure a lot of people are, and a lot of people do, which is fine. Just live your life that way, I suppose. And if you disagree with my reasons, that's perfectly fine too. Nothing wrong with that. But anyway, that's my thought. That's my thought. I just think narratively it makes sense. Now, look, some people would suggest pulling comic book logic gimmicks. Well, I would just say Magneto doesn't age. That's never been a part of Magneto's power. Not aging is not a part of Magneto's power. So you'd have to be fundamentally changing the character to do that. So I'm not really for that. Some of you may say, fairly enough, well, why not like a Bosnian thing? Or why not an Eastern European sort of thing where there's like big cultural collapse and turmoil? That's fair too. You could say Erick is from, I don't know, Slovakia or something, or some place where there was massive cruelty amongst each other and stuff like that created the foundational cultural context that led to his paradigm through which he views the world. You could do that. You can name a different one. To me, though, it just seems more faithful to the origin of the characters to make it based on a late 1950s, early 1960s American experience, considering these are characters who were based off of Malcolm X and I almost said Robert Downey Jr. I swear I almost said Robert Downey Jr. because MLK, and in my head it went RDJ. I almost said, did you not know that Magneto and Charles Xavier were based on Malcolm X and Robert Downey Jr.? Martin Luther King. Robert Downey Jr. The man can do anything. Anyway, is it really all that crazy? Honestly, is it really all that crazy to say, well, since we've got to change the origin story a bit, why don't we put him more in line with who he was actually based off of as a character anyway? Remember, we're talking about my all-time favorite comic book character. I care more about Magneto than you do. But again, it's just, to me, it doesn't feel like it's all that crazy of a thing to say, well, since because of age and time, we are forced to make some changes to the backstory of the character. Is it really, honestly, look me in the face, is it really all that crazy then to say, well, then, since we need to remold him a little bit anyway, why don't we remold him a little bit more to the cultural context of the character that he was actually based on? So I'm making an argument to be more true to the spirit of the origin of the comic. I'm making an argument to be more true and faithful to the narrative integrity of who the character is. I'm not talking about diversity. I'm not talking about, race switching just for the sake of it for no reason whatsoever. I'm not talking about that. Nothing. That has nothing to do with my rationale here. It's all about sticking in line with the spirit of the creation of the comic in the first place, and being faithful to the narrative integrity of who the character is. And maybe you disagree, and that's fine. I just hope that we, as people, are able to have a discussion about that based on the rationale, as opposed to our triggered nature of blah, 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 which we often see ourselves do online, right? Anyway, that's just my thoughts. I'm sure I don't have to ask you guys to share your thoughts, because I'm sure many of you are already pounding your keyboards away, expressing your thoughts and debating with each other and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's just my thought. That's just my thought. But do me this favor. If you want to write back to me, and write to me based on the facts. Write to me in response to what my rationale is. Do you disagree about the need to kind of reshape the character and the likeness of who it was based off of anyway? Do you disagree about trying to recreate the cultural context which formed Erick's paradigm? Do you disagree? And that's fine. If you do, great. I'd love to hear your rationale. Jump down in the comments section and let me know your thoughts. All right. With that out of the way, let's go on now to take some live questions today. A bunch of you guys have already been sending in some live questions, so let's go to those right now. And we're going to get things started with ZOMG Ruler, who writes, yesterday's Raw referenced Allen Iverson's practice. You know what's funny? Ray was here last night, my brother-in-law Ray, and he was working on some graphics. He's like, hey, man, do you mind if I put on Raw while I'm working? I'm like, no, man, go ahead. I was working on my laptop anyway. And sure enough, out comes Trish Stratus and Lita, and they went into the whole Allen Iverson practicing, which was really funny because just the other day, somebody, one of our regular viewers wrote in and like complaining about something that they didn't put in a trailer, and I pulled an Allen Iverson. I was like, trailer? We're talking about the trailer? We're not even talking about the movie, man. We're talking about the trailer? So I pulled like an Allen Iverson. And then it was kind of funny to see that pop up last night. Ben Rayner writes, John, you're awesome, and you bow to no one. One of my favorite lines from Return of the King. My friends, you bow to no one. I get chills when that scene happens. Marcus Robert Johnson writes, I was just thinking, all in good humor, but it's proof that Superman isn't white. He is an alien. He is powered by the sun, right? But never caught in a sunburn. He ain't white. If anything, he's black. That's funny. I mean, my big thing, you know me, with the whole, who do you make Superman? Do you maybe go with a Michael B. Jordan? My thing is, all other things being equal, keep the character the way they are traditionally. But at the same time with Superman is not white. Superman may look like he's white, but he's not white. Superman is an alien organism from another planet. He ain't white. He just looks white. That's it. He looks like he's a white American, but he's not. He's neither American nor is he white. He's an alien organism from another planet. That's what he is. Yeah, for me, all other things being equal. But yes, you're right. The sunburn thing, you just nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. Tobias Friedley writes, as a filmmaker, I can totally understand the struggle from Bradley Cooper. Years ago, I had to edit a personal movie from 45 minutes to 20 minutes. It still hurts. Yeah, we talked about that I had made the argument. I love A Star is Born. Love that movie. I made the argument, though, that as great as Bradley Cooper did in that movie, you can sort of tell he was a first-time director with some of the mistakes he made. To me, one of the biggest indicators that he was a first-time director and a mistake that he made was an unwillingness to cut out some of his scenes. Because one of the drawbacks of the film is it is a little too long for itself. And there are certain scenes that while good scenes, did not need to be there in order to further the narrative. Thus, they should have been lost. But as a director, as a filmmaker, it's very tough to cut out scenes that you shoot, man. Like Mel Gibson said on his director's commentary for Braveheart, he said, cutting out a scene you shot is like killing one of your children. It's hard. It's difficult. The more mature, experienced directors can do it. Not all of them can, but you can sort of tell that was one of the newbie mistakes that I think Bradley Cooper made. James Welsh writes, both Magneto and Professor X were based on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. The X-Men came about because of the civil rights movements. A black Magneto can work. It's exactly what I was saying. When you understand the origin of the character, when you understand the cultural context which gave birth to the characters in the first place, and you understand that there is a need to change that foundational experience that a young Erick had from an early 1940s experience to one that's about 20 years newer, to me, it just lines up and it makes sense. Again, it's not a diversity issue. It's a narrative integrity issue. It's a staying in line with the spirit of the creation of these characters in the first place. That's my rationale. And you don't have to agree with my rationale. That's totally fine. It's totally fine if you have a different point of view on that. But I'm saying that's my perspective on it. Marcus Robert Johnson writes, changing Magneto's backstory, they should make him Mexican and have Ice rip his parents away while they're at a parade or something. Epic. Could be powerful. I mean, joking aside, man, if the year right now was 2035 or 2040, that becomes a legitimate possibility. The thing is, I still want my Magneto character an older character. I still want Professor X an older character. If we're doing a modern telling of X-Men, right? So while you may have been joking, I think there's some validity to what you're mentioning, but only if we were about 20 more years in the future. That's why I just think this one works a little bit better. AFC writes, there's going to be carnage. Cheap, but I like it. Yeah, I didn't like it. I'll be honest with you. And I like the Venom movie. And while everybody else loved the mid-credit scene, to me it was a cheap pop. I'm going to get out of here. And when I do, there's going to be carnage. Oh, listen, everybody. He said carnage. Did you know he becomes carnage? It didn't work for me, but it worked for a lot of people, and that's all that counts. Jake Leo writes, between Beautiful Boy, Marwen, and Vice, over under 70% chance Steve Carell gets an Oscar nomination this year. If Steve Carell doesn't get an Oscar nomination this year, I'll be shocked. Shocked. Because he's got these 3 movies coming, and they all look stupid good. We're talking Beautiful Boy that he's doing with Timothée Chalamet. Welcome to Marwen, which looks so inventive and creative. And Vice, that he plays Donald Rumsfeld in the George W. Bush administration. And you know he's going to kill it. I'd be shocked. I'll take the over 70%. I'll take over. I would take 80 or 85% chance that Steve Carell gets at least one Oscar nomination for one of those films. Ricardo Ramirez writes, have you ever met any UFC fighters like Randy Couture or Chuck Liddell, GSP, in person? Hold on a second here. Let me see if I can just pull something up here for you. Something that I don't, like, some of you know this, some of you may not, whatever. Let me just see if I can get this here. I'm not sure I can, but I'll see if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. Have I ever met them? Well, I actually used to train at Randy Couture's gym, and his Couture MMA. It was a gym called Legends that he ran. Him and Baz Rutten actually started an MMA gym called Legends. That's me. This is me before my heart attacks with Randy. So, yes, I've met many UFC fighters. I've had a chance to even like roll with some of them from time to time. But yes, I have had a chance to meet Randy and a bunch of other guys. Okay, let's see. Cameron Peterson writes, let's see, where is Cameron? There it is. Imagine if the only person who was able to unite the black and white community in Brotherhood was the villain. That would be some serious depth. You know, and that's the interesting thing about Magneto, is that we just traditionally think of Magneto as the villain. There are stories in which he is the hero. Actually, my all-time favorite comic book story of all time is X-Men, not X-Men Days of Future Past, is X-Men Age of Apocalypse. I'm not talking about the movie, I'm talking about the comic run, where the past got changed and Magneto is actually the leader of the X-Men. And it comes down to this big epic battle between Magneto and Apocalypse, and it's awesome, and it's some of the best comic book issues ever made. I love X-Men Age of Apocalypse. So sometimes he's actually the hero. And in his own mind, he's always the hero. In his own mind and in his own story, he's the hero. Let's see. Angry Irish Benjamin writes, why do so many fans of The Dark Knight have such fragile egos? They take any criticism to the movie or its take on Joker as a personal insult. They brook nothing but praise for their Lord Nolan and Heath Ledger. Any positive comparisons to the movie or Ledger's Joker given to another movie or movie villain is laughed down and mocked. I can't watch it anymore. They've tainted it for me. Well, see, here's the thing. You've just put your finger on something that I have for many years talked about as being one of the big problems with film fandom. And it's that we are so insecure in our own opinions that anything that suggests anything that comes close to resembling invalidating our opinion, we take very personally and we strike out. Follow me here. I love Star Wars, but I'm not really secure in that. I'm very insecure in my own opinion, but I love Star Wars. And therefore I wrap my identity around what my opinions are, which you should never do. Never wrap your opinion or never wrap the totality of who you are or your personhood around what your opinions are. But what happens is when you wrap the totality of your personhood into your opinion, because you're so insecure about it, you feel like you need to protect it. When somebody says, I don't like Star Wars, you got two choices. You can do me and go, oh, That's too bad, man. Like, I liked it. It sucks that you don't like it. Oh, well. But what we often do is, he said he doesn't like Star Wars. That means he's attacking me. Because I like Star Wars. And if you say you don't like Star Wars, you're not just attacking, you're attacking my opinion. And my opinion is all that I am. So therefore, you're attacking me. And then they backlash and they lash out, right? And I think we all do it. No matter how secure or insecure we are, I think even if we're very, very secure, I think from time to time, all of us give into that. I think it's part of our darker nature. But it's really obvious in the movie community. You attacked a movie I like, you're essentially attacking me. And there are some people who just get so wound up and they make it part of their identity. I love The Dark Knight. And I can point out some problem. I love The Dark Knight, by the way. I believe it's a top 3 comic book movie of all time. But guess what? I just said top 3, right? There are some of you right now getting angry that I didn't just instantly say it's the best comic book movie ever. Seriously. I've seen it happen. I say, hey, Dark Knight is a top 3 all-time comic book movie for me. And people get mad. Like I just insulted their mother that I said it's top 3 instead of saying it's the best movie ever. I've seen it happen with big fans of DC films. I've seen it happen with big fans of Marvel films. I've seen it happen with fans of Star Wars. I've seen it happen with fans of Star Trek. I've seen it happen with fans of Mission Impossible. I've seen it with on and on and on. It's part of our darker nature. We do it. I've done it. I hate that I've done it, but I've done it. You've done it. It's part of the nature we got to fight, I think. Let's see. Herc08 writes, John, my first time super chatting. Thanks so much, Herc. A longtime viewer. My wife and I finally got to see Sorry to Bother You. Sorry about that. And I must say, I agree with you 100%. I don't get how. I'm going to skip over Aaron for a second. I'll come back to you, Aaron. I don't get how. I get the point of companies wanting to profit no matter what, but it was just stupid. And I want to know why IMDb listed it as a fantasy. I'm all for different, but I feel like Boots took part of the sniffing as well. Not sure what you're saying there, Herc. Horses, really? And my wife and I, not someone or someone who loves Shape of Water. Yeah, I hated Sorry to Bother You. And I was so excited for that movie. I was so excited for it. I hated it. I understand what the message of the movie is, but just because you have a message doesn't mean you executed or told your message well. This was an awful dumpster fire of a movie. But you know what? A lot of people loved it. It got high critic ratings. It got high audience ratings. And so I tip my cap and I acknowledge that I'm in the vast minority. I thought it was a horrible movie, but there are a lot of people who loved it. Guess what? It doesn't affect my identity that you don't agree with me, so that's fine. But yeah, I'm with you, Herc. I went in that movie because I'm a big fan of Lakeith. I went in there really excited to see what this movie was going to be, and I thought it was just an awful train wreck pile of garbage. I couldn't wait to get out of that theater. And then I went to go see a movie like BlacKkKlansman, which the director of Sorry to Bother You trash talked on, and BlacKkKlansman is 50 times the movie that Sorry to Bother You is. But hey, whatever. That's the beautiful thing about films, man. They're all subjective. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you had to not like it either. So there we go. Aaron Moen writes, Damien Chazelle's 3 versus Ryan Coogler's 3. Who wins? Ooh, tough. Because when you're talking about Damien Chazelle, you're talking about Whiplash, awesome. You're talking about La La Land, which is awesome. And you're talking about now First Man, which is awesome. With Ryan Coogler, you're talking about Fruitvale Station. You're talking about Creed. You're talking about, obviously, Black Panther. He's got a number of other projects coming out now, too. I will give the slight edge at this point to Damien Chazelle. I'll give the slight edge, but man, both of these guys are killing it. The only thing I'm a little bit bummed out about Creed 2 is that Ryan Coogler's not directing it. That's my only slightly bummed. He's still a producer on it, but he's not actually directing it. That's my only thing. But Creed 2 looks awesome as well. But these two dudes, man, Damien Chazelle and Ryan Coogler are crushing it. Just crushing it. And we're seeing we're in the middle of this new generation of directors coming up that are offering a really bright look at storytelling in the future. But for now, since you're putting me on the spot, Aaron, I will give the slight edge to Damien Chazelle for now. But let's see how this kind of transpires over the next number of years. All right. We go down to KW Garrett, who writes, the year 2047, Prime Minister Campea still does a movie show. You know what? I could become Prime Minister of Canada and I would still do a movie show. And he is excited about Crow and Gambit movies coming out in 2048. Tatum is 67, but he's game. You know what? They'll probably still be talking about Crow. The Crow remake will have just gone through its 38th lead actor that dropped out. And Channing Tatum is still insisting he's going to play Gambit. That is what 2047 is going to be. And the first X-Men movie comes out where Magneto is actually of Mexican descent, whose parents were torn away from him when he was younger. There, it all comes full circle. All right, Res Instance writes, what would be so wrong with creating a new mutant character with very similar, if not the same abilities as Magneto, who is African-American, but with, Res continues, completely different origins. We already know that multiple mutants have similar or the same abilities. Why not just make a new one with mag powers like Polaris and things like that? Oh yeah, you could do that. Here's the thing. I think you could do that, but everybody would just be wondering, why didn't you just make it Magneto? Why didn't you just make it Magneto? I think now, also, I've already admitted my bias. Magneto is my all-time favorite comic book character, so I want it Magneto. I don't care if his skin is white or dark. I don't care. Just as long as you have narrative integrity to who the character is and the origins of the character. To me, Magneto is the greatest comic book character of all time. And it's going to be a tough road, and some tough discussions have to happen, and some tough conversations need to happen about how do we now make Magneto today? We can't do the Jewish concentration camp thing again at this point. We're too far along. So there are some very difficult decisions that need to be made that are going to spark some very passionate. I mean, look, even if it's not a racing, even if it's an anything thing, there are going to be people that love whatever Marvel does with Magneto, and there are going to be people that hate no matter what it is that Marvel does with Magneto. We as individuals do not like change. We don't like change. So my vote would be, no, keep it Magneto and just change the aspects of Magneto that you need to change to fit him in with the current context. But still keep the core of who the character is and keep it that character. That's my opinion. But I mean, you could also do something like that. I just think changing the character, getting a different character altogether, I think would cause more backlash than not. But that's just my thoughts. It's an interesting idea, Rez. All right, next. The Spectacular Spider Guy, I like that name, writes, Yo, John, have you seen the insane behind-the-scenes photos for John Wick 3? He's on a horse, shooting people on motorcycles. John Wick 3, about to be wicked thoughts. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing, though. I, like everybody else, when those pictures of John Wick on a horse with guns came out, we all nerdgasmed, right? We all had a big nerdgasm. It was glorious. Absolutely glorious to see. I'm not going to get too carried away by set photos, though. You know me. I try to keep an even keel. I try at any rate. I don't always succeed. But I try to keep an even keel when it comes to how enthusiastic and excited and jumping up and down am I going to be over set pictures. Set pictures? We're talking about set pictures. It's not even a trailer. It's set pictures. Anyway, I'm going to try not to get too overjoyed about it, but they do look pretty badass, right? I mean, they do. They look pretty badass. Edgar Navarro writes, if they keep pushing back The Flash, could Ezra Miller leave the project? Oh, yeah. I'm sure he's under contract, but still, the pushbacks are ridiculous. Yeah, but even under every contract, there are time frames, right? There's like, you don't sign a contract and then become beholden to the studio for the next 80 years. Like, there are time windows. There are time limits. There are things like that, hey, yeah, I signed on to do 4 pictures, but if we don't do one of these pictures within 6 years, I can't be beholden to you for the rest of my career. I got to move on. That's any good agent would write that into the contract. So it's possible. But remember, it's still early. It's not like we're talking about, pushing a Flash movie from 2019 to 2035, right? It is yet another delay, but it's not like it's a whole generation away. Theoretically, if they keep pushing it, could Ezra Miller leave the project? Yes, theoretically. But I don't think we're in that neighborhood yet. I don't think we're in danger of that yet. We'll just have to wait and see. All right. Koba writes, I read Flash got delayed because Ezra has more Fantastic Beasts to make. Well, that's one of the reasons. There are many reasons. One of the things this thing is because they weren't going to be ready to shoot when they needed to shoot. And then Ezra Miller had Fantastic Beasts 3 that he's already got on his schedule. That's also for Warner Brothers. So that took priority. But again, that's only one of a long laundry list of reasons that led to that circumstance in the first place, right? But you're absolutely right, Koba. That is one of the ingredients that's led to that. Raymond Verrata writes, with the Flash movie moved back, does Ezra Miller or Henry Cavill get some salary while they wait for their movies to start production? I don't think they do. I don't think they do, or they should. Look, every agent will write something different into a contract. Thing, but Ezra Miller and Henry Cavill neither of them are hurting for money right now. So, no, I don't think they get paid while you wait. You get paid for the project. And I'm sure there's some kind of cancellation fee. It's like, hey, I'm an actor. I booked these 2.5 months open and kept those 2.5 months open to do your film because you said you're doing the film. And now you're not doing the film. I'm sure there's something built into the contract that, gets them something for that because they were inconvenienced. Like they might have turned down other movies that were going to shoot in those same dates so they could keep that date open. And now you say we're not shooting in that date. Well, I missed out on another movie I could have done. So there's probably something, but it's probably minimal at the same time. Paul Baranek writes, Flash ain't happening anytime soon. Warner Brothers needs to get their act together with these announcements. Remember the Cyborg project? And I don't know about the DCU having a darker tone. Justice League did that jarring tonal 180. I like Justice League. Look, Justice League had massive problems. I'm not denying that. But I had a lot of fun with it. I saw it in theaters like 7 times. There were parts of it I certainly don't like. The villain was terrible. All that kind of stuff. But overall, I had a really good time with it. I thought the tone was great. But tone is not the problem. I've always argued tone has never been the problem. The tone of the DCU has just been the scapegoat excuse. But it's not the problem. The tone of the Dark Knight films were darker. Nobody was complaining about tone then. So I just think the tone issue kind of became a scapegoat. As far as it not happening anytime soon, well, no. It's not going to come out till at least 2021. I think a lot is riding on the Aquaman. If Aquaman can make $500 million worldwide, I think you're going to see a Flash movie. If Aquaman comes out and makes $300 million worldwide, or as Scooby-Doo would say, whoa. It would be pretty rough. Then it would be pretty rough, and then we'd be in a very awkward situation. But if Aquaman does well, and I believe it'll do well, it's not going to make $800 million or anything like that. But if it does well, $400 to $500 million, I think everything else will just keep rolling. Whatever Walter Hamada's plan is right now, and we don't know what Walter Hamada's plan is for the DCEU at this point, but whatever it is, I'm sure they'll just keep rolling. Aquaman comes out, makes $305 million worldwide, it could cause some massive changes. Robert Johnson writes, I'll repeat, if Erick Killmonger was alive and he gained mutant powers, he would be Magneto 2.0. Bull. Absolute bull. For all we know, his mother's maiden name is Erick Lesh. I don't agree with that at all. Other than the fact that his name is Erick, and other than the fact that he's black. The characters of Killmonger and Erick Lesnar are so fundamentally different. They're so fundamentally different. Erick Killmonger, the whole issue of we got to help people around the world who look like us and blah, 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 that was all veneer. That was all fake, false justification. This is the brilliance of that character. That was all fake, false justification for just a guy who was mad at hell in the world and just wanted to watch it burn. This was a guy who, we're going to kill them all, and we're going to kill their children. Remember, he said that in the movie. And we'll kill their children, and anybody else who does this, and we're going to unleash war. And blah. Like, it's understanding the fundamental mentality of where Magneto's coming. Magneto, it's a very different thing. Like, a lot of comic book villains have functionally the same target and goal, But what differentiates them from each other is the nature of their character. The nature of the character of an Erick Lesnar is so radically different from that of a Killmonger. It's almost ridiculous to even address. And it's simply looking at those characters on the thinnest surface level. On the very thinnest of surface levels. Once you break through that thinnest veil surface level, then you start to realize these are radically different characters. So I'm going to disagree with you, Robert, on that. I'm going to wholeheartedly disagree with you. Like, again, from the veneer, if you want to describe it a certain way, I can see where you would first have that impression. But once you break that tiny millimeter thin veneer on the surface, you start to realize these are universally different characters from each other. So I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you on that one. Let's see. Sebastian writes, can you please confirm August box office was up 72%? No, it was not. Rogue. Oh gosh, we had a big jump. Here we go. Rogue Mammoth writes, and guys, please, if you have not sent in a super chat, please don't send in any more. I've already gone over time and I want to finish out the ones that we got here. Rogue Mammoth writes, hey John, I've been watching you every day since AMC. Oh, thank you so much, Rogue. Finally got around to watching Upgrade last night. Crazy, isn't it? I must say that it wasn't a bad little Venom movie at all. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about it. When I saw Venom, I didn't even think about the similarities to an Upgrade. And then somebody else on the show wrote in and mentioned how they felt like the similarities between the movies. And that's when I went, oh, actually, yeah, like when you go plot point wise and like these mile markers, if you follow the mile markers through Venom and through Upgrade, there are some eerily funny similarities. Very different movies, and yet when you just follow the mile markers, there's some pretty funny similarities as well. I hadn't even thought about it until somebody else brought it up, so you're in good company there, Rogue. Paul Baranick writes, Titans was surprisingly okay. Expected a train wreck. I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that from a lot of people, that it's not bad. I'm not hearing great things about it, but I'm hearing not bad, which is a lot better than the train wreck that trailer made it look out to be. So again, I'm not going to be watching it at any time soon because I'm not going to go out and get the DC streaming service for one show that I'm hearing mediocre things about. I'll probably jump on board with it once a Swamp Thing launches. I'm really curious about their Swamp Thing project. Once that gets on there and there's more to watch, that's when I'll probably give it a shot. Javier Rios 405 writes, how are you doing today? Are you having a good day? You know what? So far, I'm having a great day so far. My wife got home this morning just before I started the show. She got back from Vegas. Her flight landed early this morning. So off to a good day. Going to head into the studio after I'm done the show today. We're doing a lot of very cool things in the studio today. Good day today. I'm holding out for a really good one. Thank you for asking. Michael Woods sends in a super chat. Thank you so much, Michael. Sebastian writes, you're triggered these young kids in the live chat. Oh, I have no doubt. I have no doubt there are some very emotionally fragile, sensitive people who don't know how to handle some, it's a little bit of adversity and are probably going absolutely nuts, swearing and everything in the chat board. Those people exist. There's nothing you can do about it. Wheeze Young writes, my first reaction was, hell no, how dare you? But then I remember the character of Magneto was inspired by the Malcolm X, and now it makes sense. Again, my only point here is, look, just before jumping up and down, look, there are going to be a lot of people who just go blah, 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 blah before ever listening to my reasons. But people today don't care about reasons. They only want to hear what they want to hear. And if they don't hear what they want to hear right away, and let's face it, we're all a little bit guilty of this, right? If they don't hear what they want to hear right away, they like, I just hope people take a breath and listen to my reasons. But hey, there's going to be people that don't do that, and that's just the way it is. Cobra writes, change Magneto origin from concentration camps under Hitler to the gulags under Stalin. Again, like I said, there could be some other iterations that you can do too. I wonder if the Stalin era might also be a little bit too early in this point, but that is another valid change. That's another valid way to change it. Again, you're getting into kind of the same time era, so it doesn't address the age problem as much. And again, to me, since the characters themselves were modeled after these real-life individuals, if you got to make a change anyway, why not kind of model them into the context that those characters, those individuals came out of? To me, it just makes sense and kind of stays in line with the spirit of who the characters are. But again, there are other options. There are absolutely other options. And that's a good example of one, Koba. Javier Rios 405. People in the chat today are going crazy. Oh, no doubt. Corey Scott Johnson writes, I'm going to spam Kevin your Magneto video. I don't know who Kevin is. Robert Johnson writes, if you said it in 1960, you'd have to change in 20 years. Well, guess what? No matter where you said it, you're going to have to change it in 20 or 30 or 40 years. No matter where you said it. But let's face it, the X-Men universe they set up in the movies is not going to be the same cinematic universe in 20 years. You can't say this character comes from the concentration camps. You can't do that now. You got to change it. But you'll have to change it again in another 20 or 30 years. Yup. Yes, you will. Yes, you will. But that's what you're going to have to do. So who cares about, think of the right now. What do we do right now? What we need to do right now is make that cultural change. It doesn't have to be the America of the 1950s and 1960s. Maybe it could be the Stalin Gulag. Maybe it can be another Eastern European thing. Maybe it could be something else. But you got to make that change one way or the other. Tinnis Flato writes, Magneto based off Malcolm X and Robert Downey Jr. How old is Robert Downey? I think you meant RDJ. I can't believe I was almost going to do that. Did you know that Magneto and Charles Xavier were based off of Malcolm X and Robert Downey Jr.? I came this close to saying it out loud. I couldn't believe it. Goju King 54 writes, one of the few problems I can think of is Magneto might still have a tie-in to his kids and Sokovia. Not to mention, by this new backstory, Magneto might just sound like an older Killmonger to some. Again, because his name is Erick and he's black. People will get over it. People would get over that. I do not think at all they're going to tie Magneto in to Scarlet Witch whatsoever. They're not going to tie her to Scarlet Witch whatsoever. Scarlet Witch is not a mutant. She got her power a different way. She never had mutant parents. She never, all that kind of stuff. So I don't think, regardless of what they do with the Magneto character, I do not believe under any circumstances they're going to actually connect him to the Scarlet Witch character. ZCM Zombie Custom Maps writes, do you think in the Venom film that they should have delved deeper into the disagreement between Venom and Riot's views on world domination? Nah. It's a film. Could that have been interesting? Yes. But the film was such a lighter, fun action movie that doing that really didn't become necessary. If it was trying to be a different kind, like a deeper movie, it was trying to be a more philosophical movie, you could have done something like that. But honestly, with the nature of the Venom movie, the way it was, I'm not talking about the way it should be, but the way it was, that type of scene to me probably wasn't necessary to do what they were trying to do. So, no, I'm okay with them not doing it. I'm okay. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have been opposed to a scene like that being in it. Not opposed to it, but at the same time, I don't think it was really all that necessary for the type of movie that it was. And it just would have made the movie, longer anyway. So, yeah, I'm good with it. Film Wallace writes, two things they could do for Magneto is one, born after Holocaust, in his views are due to what his father experienced in the concentration camps. Two, he was born in Stalin's regime and his parents were killed then. Again, many other options. I believe whatever it is, it has to be something that he himself lived through. It was so formative to him. I don't think it can just be about a guy who's getting mad at something that happened to somebody else. I think it becomes imperative that it's something that he as an individual and as a character goes through and endures. So I don't think it can be something based on his dad. I think it's going to be something based on him. Whether that's Eastern European, something in America, something in Canada. I don't know. Maybe he's a butthurt Toronto Maple Leaf fan who's just so damn mad that the Leafs haven't even been to the Stanley Cup in his fucking lifetime. Am I bitter? Anyway. Let's see. Javier Rios 405 writes, have you seen Hereditary or Upgrade? What did you think about them? They're in your top. Well, I'm not going to sit here and do full movie reviews of Hereditary and Upgrade. I have seen both of the films. I have talked about both of the films. Hereditary might be in my top 10, right in the lower part of my top 10 right now, although it'll probably get bumped out at some point, but I loved it. Hereditary is great. Upgrade, hell of a lot of fun. It, gets very it transitions genres too into a very science fiction-y kind of movie near the end of the film, which is really cool at the same time. So I like both of these films. I doubt either one of them will be in my top 10 though when the end of the year finally hits, but that doesn't take away that they're both really, really good movies and you should definitely check them out if you get a chance. Final question today comes to us from Sharpie, who writes, "Hey John, with the Magneto thing, what if they do neo-Nazis? This would mean they could move the time up so he's not old, and it would mean he still has the Nazi-type backstory. Not sure how it would work, but just an idea." Again, though, it doesn't, the neo-Nazi thing doesn't work as well as, say, like the Stalin-era stuff or some Bosnia why do I always mispronounce Bosnia I'm saying the word in my head and I can't get it out of my mouth. Herzegovina. It's going to be one of those days, guys. Or a Bosnian situation or something else, but it has to be something that's culturally wide. Something that just doesn't form his idea about a certain small group of people, but is formative of his view of humanity as a whole. Right? And something like some small localized neo-Nazi group, I don't think can do it. I think it has to be something bigger and broader, like some of the suggestions that have been brought up here in the chats today. Something like mine, the 1960s, 1950s America. Things like it has to be a broader, culturally wide thing. It has to be a scope-wide thing that doesn't just affect young Erick's view of a certain group of people, but it affects his paradigm of how he views all of humanity. And so it needs something as a little bit, I think at any rate, it should probably be something on a little bit bigger of a scale. But that's just my thoughts. So take that for what it's worth. Thanks a lot for the thoughts there, Sharpie. All right, guys, that will do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, guys, at the end of the day, we're talking about movies. We're talking about movies and our opinions about movies. You don't need to agree with my opinions of movies. You don't need to like what I like. You don't need to dislike what I dislike. I'm just hoping that when you watch my show and you listen to me, I'm not trying to change your mind on anything. I'm at least trying to get you to the point that you understand why somebody else has a different opinion than you, and that will help you understand why you hold the opinion you hold. It's not about us agreeing. It's about us having a really good discourse with each other so we can understand each other better and have better sharpen our own points of view. And if we can do that today, then mission accomplished. So thank you guys for being here today. I had a really good time doing this one. Don't forget, guys, the John Campea Show returns again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That will do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until my next show, bye-bye.